Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 397 with Mikal Vega, who is an amazing person. I am so glad I met him. I met him through our mutual friend, Darren Ross, and he is just an absolutely incredible person. The first moment I talked to him at Darren's party, I was like, I got to have him on this podcast. He's just so incredible. This is a very inspirational podcast and a very emotional podcast. I'm just giving people fair warning because it gets very emotional. Kristen, what did you think of it?
Yeah, well, this was, like you said, it's crazy. I'm not going to really spoil anything, but just to give you a little background on him, he kind of knew he did want to act at a young age, but before he did that, he served 22 years as a SEAL. And EOD, which is an explosive ordnance disposal specialist. So very intense career that. And then he did his first movie, Transformers, Dark of the Moon in 2011. And then that's how his career took off from there. But yeah, like you said, like he's such a kind, smart, and hardworking person. And you guys kind of go into other things of like the video game stuff that he's doing right now and his he loves the storytelling of that. And then you also discuss Vital Warriors, which is a nonprofit, and he founded, I think it was in 2012. And his goal was just to work and restore military and civilian veterans to their, as he says, inherent state of health and vitality by providing access kind of to a unique fusion of mental and physical disciplines, all without medicine. So it's very interesting and really cool.
Yeah, he's like I said, he's a fascinating person. He did start off as an extra and then sort of grew as an actor from there, and is now directing, as you said. And he's been doing some great directing for video games and doing cinematic stuff as well. And it's just really interesting career that he's had. Like Kristen said, won't spoil it too much. There's a lot going on here. There's definitely some CG going on as well as other things, but a lot of to talk about his history in the military and how that influenced everything he's doing, which is really kind of fascinating. So thank you so much for Mikal for being on. It was incredible. Okay, we got a couple of announcements. We got to get these out there. First, you can find all these out at chaos.com, but V-Ray 6 is out for Max and Maya and SketchUp and Rhino and Cinema 4D. I don't know how many more are left, but they are going to be coming as they go. But lots of great features in V-Ray 6. So go check it out again at chaos.com. You've got several events happening. Kristen, what's going on?
Yeah, so you can find these out at chaos.com/events. We have two happening on October 19th. One is going to be an in-person event, which is called Chaos Day in Paris, and they are meeting at Cyclone. It will be in the evening from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then same day, October 19th, it will be an online show, which is a Chaos Campus Live show. This will be episode 8. And then October 24th, we do have a free webinar for V-Ray 6 for SketchUp. And then on the 26th, another webinar for V-Ray 6 for Cinema 4D. And then on October 1st, another free webinar for V-Ray 6 for Maya. 31st. Oh my gosh. On Halloween. I should have, duh.
It is on Halloween. So if you want to have your Halloween free webinar with V-Ray 6 for Rhino, check it out. Again, all of these can be found at chaos.com/events. So be sure to check that out and sign up for those needs. Now, if people want to know more about the podcast, Kristen, where can they go?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have any ideas of podcasts or questions about this one or have any suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is labs@chaos.com. But for now, please enjoy. And you should watch this one too, because it's really quite great to have Mikal on video. So go to our YouTube, check it out. But check out Mikal Vega, episode number 397.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passe. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, You need to make sure everything has for now.
Mikal, thank you so much for being on. I'm very excited about this. We met at Darren's birthday party, and the minute I started talking with you, I was just enamored by your energy and the stuff that you do, and talking about directing and everything. But I know based on some things I looked up, you've got an extremely powerful and interesting past that has led you into some incredible things. I'd love to get our audience to know a little bit about you and about, all the things that you've done in your life that has sort of led to you to do where you are now. So where did this all start? Where did your passion for acting and do that start? And what happened after that?
It's interesting. First off, thanks for having me. And any opportunity I get to speak about this is really a blessing, because that's kind of the, trying to elicit this type of awakening in other people has kind of become my life's purpose. I'm kind of like the walking how-to, and how to come from really dark places and turn that darkness into a power that we can use our creative talents to serve others, right?
Yeah.
And so my my whole endeavor started when I was very young. I was in Ohio. I was born in Akron, Ohio, and I in a farm town called Bath.
Okay.
And so there was something about film and television that had always called to me. And I'm sure you hear this from everybody all the time that get into this industry. I mean, it's pretty concentrated, those types of childhood experiences, I'd imagine, but for me, it was this inherent knowing that that I wanted to be an actor. And I knew that at a very young age. And so that's what I pursued. And I begged my grandmother. I was like, please, like, send me to acting school. I know I'm supposed to do this. And you know how kids are and how fleeting things can be. Mm-hmm. And so she took it with a grain of salt until I was really persistent. I was always like, film me doing this. And it wasn't like we could whip out a cell phone and do that, right? So what she did is she took me to a garage sale and she bought me a Super 8. No instruction manual, no nothing, just a kid that had a modicum of intelligence on how to splice film together, and so I started making these little like home movies that really had no like cohesiveness or anything to it, is nothing structured, but just when I saw that stuff come to life, that I successfully put something together, and that film sparked to life, it was like there was something magical about it to me, and I was so fascinated by it, and that kind of was the groundwork for everything that happened after that. I got into like playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid too, and I really love fantasy, and I just make up these stories, and everybody really seemed to like the stories I was making up, as we were playing, and then when I got into junior high, and well, at the end of elementary school, I started getting into singing. And then through junior high and high school, I performed. I started. I was a Glee Club kid, and that's kind of what I did. And then, and between being in Ohio and Virginia Beach, there wasn't many options to kind of. There was no culture there. There was no culture of film and television where I was growing up. So it was either New York or Los Angeles, right?
Right.
So, and no means to kind of tap into any of that. So when I graduated when I was 17, I joined the military. It was a military town. So Norfolk, Virginia was a military town. So I'd go to school in Virginia, and then I'd spend my summers back in Ohio with my grandmother. And so that was kind of the routine growing up. And so I joined the military when I was 17, and I got into bomb squad, explosive ordnance disposal. Did that for 9 years, and I kind of wanted something more. I felt like I was still not. There was still something else out there that I was supposed to be doing, and so I went into the SEAL teams when I was 28. I went to BUDS training. So about 9 years into my military service, and and yeah, I stayed there, spent the rest of my 22 years in the military in the SEAL teams.
Wow.
And I did a couple of tours to Iraq, and there was, and then and concentrating on war for so long. And I've said this in other podcasts, and it's really, the challenge these days is trying to keep it fresh, for people that have heard this before. But the story's the story. You can watch reruns of The Predator all you want,
Right.
but it is kind of not going to change. But never seems to lose its luster for me.
Yeah.
But I had an event, it was this really awakening event in combat where and this is a prevalent situation that we have in the world today in the veterans community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And real quick, this thing's still giving me some sound. All right, great, that's better.
Okay.
So I when I was in Iraq, whatever pretenses and all these types of things that you hear about why we went into Iraq and why we went, at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon the individual that raises his hand and goes, I want to go do that, their reasoning for doing that. And for me, when I went into EOD, I wanted to be God's shield. I prayed that God would make me his shield and protect innocents from these weapons of war that didn't go off properly. These innocents that, these children that, walk across minefields from, Vietnam or, whatever it was, right? Which was great to a point until, the reality of that particular job hits, and you're not really doing that so much as, you're being the janitor for the Navy. So not everything, and I don't mean any disrespect to any EOD guys out there. That was just, kind of, doing range clearances after everybody else had fun all day.
Right.
You go out there and you clean everything up, so was kind of the experience of it until I started doing, augmentation with, the SEAL teams. And that's where I started to learn, like, wait a minute, that's really what I want to be doing. And so then my prayer shifted. Now I want to be, God's sword. So I got the shield part. Now I want to be the sword or the spear, whatever you want to use. And so I went and did that, and I had an event that happened in Iraq that kind of defined me. And I think a lot of warriors have that. And what the event was for me was, regardless of all pretenses of why we went into Iraq and what and wasn't found, or what and wasn't, articulated that was found, and for me it was, we went into an area where there was a terrorist that was chopping people's heads off and setting them on the neighbors' porches, and we went in and removed that, let's just say. And when you do something like that, when you engage in a direct action mission where you go in and you remove a cancer that's terrorizing these innocent people, it doesn't matter, the reason why you're there that you're told why you're there, or that the American people are told why they're there, at that point it doesn't matter. You know you're doing something that's right. You know you have a purpose of being there, and it's a purpose that kind of transcends the human experience and goes into a more, for me, a more spiritual one. And a lot of that was hindsight as well, these realizations. So um, what had happened was, there's a woman that came out, and she was in tears, and she was directly affected by this thing, and obviously, and she was trying to give me anything she could. She was shaking, and she was in tears, trying to just like give me anything she could to reciprocate. And we kind of locked, like our eyes locked. Mine was coming from a place of, and I could feel the energy like coming through me. I mean, think about it. We just, did a direct action mission, and this is one of the people's lives that you've impacted forever. You've reestablished a hope that that they wouldn't have, that they can go on and perhaps do so, have a life, and that reciprocation of, when you're locked in this type of thing with another human, that you're sharing a life and death experience, right? It's a shared experience, and then it becomes multiplicative when you're the one that exacted the violence, so the necessary violence,
Mm-hmm.
and so multiply that by multiple episodes, right? Like to that became foundational for me, of like, and it became the foundation for me that violence in this manner is absolutely necessary, and I've been chosen to exact that violence, to protect and to defend, and to eradicate you know these types of um, these types of evil. There's absolutely evil, and it needs to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was chosen to do that. That's the way I saw it, and that's the way I experience it, and that's the way I see it. So as far as, for me, the big problem wasn't anything that I did in combat. The big problem was when I was removed from that sense of purpose. Yeah, you get that, and you realize that you were engineered by a divine force to go protect innocence and defend life. Um, that's I mean, where do you go from there? It kind of, it really, once that was over for me, that's where I started having a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
In combat, I was very peaceful. Like, I slept great. I had no issues. I felt, everything just felt right with the world. This person's this person's the bad guy. Prove it. All right, here's the proof. Okay, I buy that. Let's go get this person.
Mm-hmm.
And let's stop them from being bad. And sometimes that meant, just bringing them back to get, kind of bigger fish, and then sometimes it meant something more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So and I was good with all of that. It was when I came back that, like, everything really started to fall apart for me, and I couldn't sleep, and all these types of things. And creativity, there was no creativity. There was, I mean, I'm swimming in the world of destruction, the cultivation of destruction. But inherently, I knew when I came back that I needed to get back to creativity. I knew that. I could feel that. It was a systemic, I could feel it in my heart, and that I needed to do that, but the capacity to do so, and just kept being stymied by, circumstance. I tried to build an art studio that I was going to get deeper into my art, because I draw and everything as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they flooded my house out for 10 hours, and I had to live in a hotel for, it was like, that. And then I had to take emergency custody of my son. And, all of these things came within 2 weeks of me returning from my second tour to Iraq. And so this isn't a woe is me story. This is a process story. And this is an attempt to show people that at the end of the day, those events were absolutely critical for me to be where I'm at today. And had I not had them, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. If I was, I may still be, on a battlefield somewhere. Who knows? So, or not. How about that? Or not. So, you keep moving forward, and I've talked about this a lot. I had an IED go off on my vehicle, and I sustained some injuries from that I had to have neurosurgery for in 2009. I was on 13 different medications at one period of time, and so I was having a very challenging period in my life. I had taken emergency custody of my child because his mother had abused him, and so we had to take emergency custody of him. They were going to put him in a home if I deployed again, so I had to step out of the active SEAL teams, and move to the West Coast, where I kind of focused on family and trying to get myself right again, because I was having a hard time. And combat related stress is what they call it, and
Right.
Mild traumatic brain injury, blast exposure, all this type of repetitive blast exposure. Explosives were my specialty in the military, and so I kind of had a lot of blast exposure, which they've found out that causes a lot of issues with guys.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the ongoing journey at of healing that continues. So fast forward to 2010, I get asked to be on kind of be a Coke can, a special looking Coke can in the back of Shia LaBeouf in Transformers 3. And I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. Let's try that. That sounds like a new experience. Let's go.
Okay.
Sounds exciting. Let's go do that.
So you were going to be an extra?
Let's go play make as a special ability extra.
Okay.
And Michael Bay, the first day of production, he walks by. You got to understand, I looked a lot different then.
Okay.
I was 248 pounds. I had a shaved head, this big ass mustache, and I was just like angry as shit.
Right.
And how's profanity on the show?
Tim Miller's been on. Let's just put it that way. So you'll.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, good. So I'm sitting there, and he walks by, and he kind of does a double take, and he's like, "Holy shit, what the fuck do they call you?" And I was like, "Hooch," and he was like, "Fuck." Perfect. He goes, what? He goes, "You want to be an actor?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "All right, come with me." And he starts walking, and he turns around and goes, "Wait a minute, can you act?" And I was like, "You're the fucking director. Aren't you supposed to be the decider of that?" He's like, "Fair enough. All right, cool. All right, come here." And he goes, "I want you to do, this, that, and the other." And like, there was this scene. I don't know if you've seen the film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've seen the film. It's heavy CG. Like, I think they won a SAG, or they got nominated for a SAG for CG.
Yeah.
And so he goes, is that part where the skyscraper's falling down, right? Yeah. And that I think Shockwave is attacking the building with his pet. And so he goes, what I want you to do is I want you to run down. And it was really cool, like how they did it, because they had this whole building. They had this whole like skyscraper floor on a gimbal.
Right.
And what they do is they'd actually tilt this thing up at like, 39 degrees.
Right.
And we'd be sprinting down this thing. And like, so we'd get,
Right.
it was really cool.
Yeah.
It was a really cool experience. And so I sprint down this thing, and then I go out the window, and he goes, when you stick your head out of the window, I want you to look over in this direction over here, camera right, and just go, the building is teetering. And I'm like, okay, building is teetering. Who the fuck says teetering? All right, let's, so I go back up, and I'm sitting there, and I got to tell you, like, up to this point, none of it had clicked. That Glee Club kid I told you about didn't, like, that was long gone.
Right.
That was long distant past. That had been covered by, years of combat and, focusing on war, right?
Right.
In that moment, it like all started flooding back in. I was like, wait a minute. At some point in my life, I was like, that kid came back, and I remember talking to my grandmother, and all of it came back at once, and all of a sudden, I'm finding it hard to breathe. I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like getting lightheaded, man.
Yeah.
I'm like getting lightheaded, and like everybody's like looking at me, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Man, I'm like having a panic attack or something, right?
I think you were excited.
I was excited. And so, and he goes, action. And I go sprinting down that thing. Ah! I go leaning out, and I go, the building's tilting. Fuck. And he goes, you can't say fuck. This is a kid's show. And I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. And I go back up, and he goes, okay, just do it again. And so I go down, and I'm like, now I realize this is the chance, and I'm fucking it up.
Right.
And I'm like, I better get this shit right. And so I go down, I run down, I lean out, and I'm like looking around, and he's like, holy shit, that's fucking great. Look over here,
Right.
And he goes, now lean over your shoulder and go, they're shooting at the building. And I'm like, they're shooting at the building. and I'm looking out, and he's like, holy fuck, you look nervous as shit. Yeah, that's what I want, and he goes, cut. Fuck yeah, man. He goes, come here, do this. And then all of a sudden, it's like, and I was being pushed by the guy that got me out there. He was kind of keeping me in his mind too. Sure. And really, he was a really huge help. I'll never forget that. His name's Harry Humphreys. He helped me a lot.
Nice.
And I became a principal in the film. Like got a credit, all that stuff. got SAG out of it, and then Michael brought me back for Transformers 4.
Yep.
Which I had a little bit bigger part in.
Yep.
And then he put me in Ninja Turtles, The Last Ship. He really helped a lot. And say what you want about Michael Bay, but I really like that guy. He was real nice to SEALs. I can see what kind of people are talking about, but he was really good to us. And he's always been a huge supporter of the military, and we're used to people yelling anyway, so it's like, right. It's like, oh, this seems very at home, this seems great.
Sure.
It's easy. Just don't piss off the platoon chief, Yeah. So that was kind of the foray into the film and television thing. And, I got back from that, and I from on one of the breaks, I went and talked to my wife. I was like, I think we should pursue this. Like when I get out, like, cause that same guy, Harry Humphreys, was like, I don't say this to anybody. He goes, but I feel like you should pursue this. You should actually give this a go. Like out of all the people that I brought in over the years, because this guy worked on The Rock with Michael,
Right.
like he's been in there for a minute, and he's like he goes, I don't tell people this, but like you should try this because I think you got a shot.
That's amazing.
So I listened to him, and it still wasn't fixing things, but there was another event that is kind of the tie-in to everything, and why I'm telling this story is once I came off of one of the shoots one day. You got to understand, like I had this huge rocket launcher on my back, right? I had a grenade launcher, a Milcor grenade launcher, which is kind of like a semi-automatic 40 millimeter grenade launcher, right?
Right.
And so I I remember we got done. I'm like, we've been running around the streets of Chicago during the summer all day long. Like, I'm completely saturated. Like, I'm soaked all the way through. Like, when I sit down, there's like a puddle running away from us, because we're just like pounding water and like, it's an action film,
Yeah.
so you're sprinting all the
Yeah.
time. And the Milcor was a real Milcor. It was actually heavier than the actual thing because the blanks are uh, heavier than the actual
Oh,
round.
I didn't realize that.
So I had a heavy ass weapon, about 30 something pounds,
Right.
and and he goes, uh, they were you weren't. They had like this huge crowd, like, and they were about 100 meters away, and across the street, and I remember we were walking back, and I see this kid, man. He couldn't have been like 4, and I'll never forget it. And I tell this in almost every interview I do because it's so profound. Um, I I see this kid, and our eyes lock, and it's like he freezes. He's like, and he reaches, and I go, you, and he's like, and he goes, mom, and he's like going, mom, look, and I start walking towards him, and the closer I get to him, the more he's like, like Godzilla's coming out of the water, right?
Right.
I pick him up, and I'm looking at him. I was like, "You enjoying the show?" And he's just like non-responsive, right? He's catatonic at this point.
Right.
And I look at his mom, and his mom's crying, right? And in that moment, like I could tell that they were like homeless or something
Okay.
because they were super dirty and they were like, and it's like, oh, and and she goes, you don't know how much this means to him. Like you have no idea how much this means to him. And I look at the father, he's crying and he's breaking out this wind up camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment that I had a flash to that woman from Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this realization that, wait a minute, I can use creativity to have the same type of an effect on people as I can destructive forces, right?
Right.
So that sense of purpose, kind of like, hey, there's a sense of purpose here as well in film and television. And it's been ever since then. I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, we should give this a shot because I think that this kind of ties into everything that I need to do, that I need to be able to become who I am to become, whatever that is,
Right.
and I think this is the path to do that. And she's like, okay, let's do it. I was like, yeah, but if I do it, like, we're doing it. Like, that's what we're going to be doing until, we die because this is it. And um, so we moved up here in 2012. I was medically discharged. Invariably, I was medically discharged in 2012 due to the injuries I sustained in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to do some of the things that we do as SEALs, diving and stuff like that, because I'd get dizzy for no reason. I had vestibular damage. So I'd get dizzy for no freaking reason, and you don't want that to happen when you're jumping out of an airplane at night, running into people. And or coming up from a dive even, then that's a neurological symptom, and that kind of screws everything up as well, right? So I was like, okay, let's go. And I got out in 2012 and we moved right up here. And I've worked pretty consistently as an actor, ever since we got up here, don't count 2020. That wasn't very good. But everything else was, was pretty consistent, and subsequently bigger and bigger roles, the most recent being the Lincoln Lawyer, that I had a pretty good part on. And prior to that, the Mayans had like a 5-episode arc, 5 out of 10 or something like that, that's not bad, right? So, and there's some stuff brewing now that I can't really talk about, but it's been great. And so it was funny because I did a tech advisor job. Like one of the things that I encountered when I first came up here was like, once they find out you're a SEAL, everybody wants you as a tech advisor, right?
Of course.
Like, you could do a tech advisor job. You could be an advisor. And it's like, wait a minute, man. I got more to offer than just showing your actors how to hold a gun,
Or how to salute properly.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I don't. And to be honest with you, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Like I don't want to do that. But I wound up doing it. I did it on this show called The Brave.
Right.
And on The Brave, just prior to The Brave, I had made a short, like with Darren actually, and I wrote it. I did this. I had some time, like I was in between things, and I did this this course through USC that was for veterans, called The Art of Visual Storytelling, which was basically like creating 2 short films in like a 6-week period, right?
Mm-hmm.
Writing it, casting it, shooting it, editing it, and doing all the post on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I did that. No budget, no nothing, calling in favors, doing all this stuff. Hey, I got this story, and well, let me see the script. And everybody's like, holy shit, dude, you can write. I was like, I can? Okay, cool. And and the guy's name's Miles Watkins.
Okay.
The guy that runs the program. And he was like, he goes, you're a writer, and you're being pretty ambitious, is what he said. He goes, this script you wrote is pretty ambitious for what this project is. He goes, it involves cops, and it has combat sequences, and it has like multiple locations. And he goes, this is pretty big. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And he goes, you only got 3 weeks to completely do this thing. I'm like, I understand. He goes, okay, and you're not allowed to have any synced dialogue. Like, so there's no dialogue in the thing that is synced.
Okay.
And he goes, okay, go for it. Let's see what you do. And so I made this short. I'll share it with you if you're interested.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a artistic representation of what I've gone through.
Okay.
And how I found this form of meditation developed by warriors that cultivates creative energies that offset the destructive forces of war, right? Brings balance to the destructive forces of war. And so that's what this story, and that's what the story is about.
Okay.
And so I made that short, and I had to tell it because as I'm this tech advisor for The Brave, which is an NBC show that was getting like, it was 8 points to 9 points,
Right.
on on all the reviews and like people watching it and diehard loyal fans. Everybody loved it,
Right.
and they canceled it, of course.
Sure.
You know, it's really good TV. Um, and Anne Hesh was actually
Hmm.
one of the leads, and with Mike Vogel being number one on the sheet. So um, I'm there doing the tech advisor thing, and I start going, hey, and I started talking to the producing director, and I started going, hey, if the camera's over here, and I had this guy over here doing this, that, and the other, you know, what do you think this would look like? Can I show you something? What about that? He's like, holy shit,
Okay.
that's really cool. You know, and it only took a couple of those. He turns to me, he goes, you ever thought about directing? And I was like, actually, I just wrote and directed my first short film.
Right.
And he's like, I'd like to see it. And I was like, very cool. That's the way to do it,
Right.
right? You know, like, I'd like to see it.
Yeah, you got to get
Okay.
them to ask you.
Yeah, exactly. So he goes, he takes a look at the thing. He comes back. He goes, this is the first thing you've ever directed? And I go, yeah. He goes like, holy shit. Okay, we've got to start developing you as a director, which they started doing,
That's
right?
amazing.
And I was set to be the second unit director for the season finale,
Mm.
right? It would have been DGA, all the cool shit,
Mhm.
you know, and they canceled the show. So, you know, true Hollywood story,
Yep.
you know, in typical Hollywood fashion.
Yep.
There I was, right there again, you know, because it's been that.
Right.
It has been that, like right there, over and over and over and over again. And so, so you fast forward like another year, what I had learned there, because I was so reluctant to do the tech advisor job,
Right.
I got asked to be a tech advisor for a little known franchise called Call of Duty. And and I knew from that experience that I say yes. Over time, they'll see I'm worth more than that,
Right.
right? So because I had that experience, I kind of knew to show up for that. I was like, yes, I will be your tech advisor for this. I will help you find a talent for this,
Right.
you know. And then one thing led to another, and they asked me to come in and be the mocap director for um, the last Cold War game that came out for Treyarch.
Okay.
And basically, what I did for that was with my team, I conceptualized and directed all the executions for the last game.
Nice.
Well, not all of them, but a good majority of them, right? The animators keyed some of them, but for the most part, the more advanced ones, you know, a good 80% of those were me and my team that did it. And so from that success, they then um, asked me to start doing some help out the cinematic team.
Hmm.
You know, so I started to be the mocap director for all the cinematics. Word got out, and then Sledgehammer reached out and wanted me to do it for the Vanguard game that was released.
Mm.
Except for now it was the campaign, right?
Okay.
And then Infinity Ward, with the game that's getting ready to release in October, I was the second unit director. So anything action oriented, stunt oriented, I was directing that.
Nice.
So and in video games, it's not like film. It's like you have a bunch of directors, and it's very collaborative. Like everybody's like figuring out the best possible way to get, and it's really nice. I like the environment, and but I wanted more. Like I always want to grow uh, deeper, and I can feel where I'm supposed to be. You know what I mean? And we've been moving into that trajectory. really well. Treyarch asked me, did I want to sign with them, and become the performance capture director for their next title. And I can't discuss much about that, obviously.
Sure.
But so I signed with Treyarch as the performance capture director last November.
Okay.
And things have just been, have been pretty great, and they're an incredible company to work with. And I'm a part of the animation team. And I report directly to the animation director. So it's been fantastic. I want to talk about more with that, but I can't.
It's okay.
Another side project that they let me keep doing, that they let me keep doing is I am the mocap director for Diablo 4 as well.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So that, and remember what I told you, the fantasy thing, and that's like one of my...
Yeah, you played a lot of D&D as a kid. I know exactly what that's like.
It's that's my IP right there, dude. That and World of Warcraft are like,
right.
Don't get me wrong. I love Call of Duty. I played Call of Duty with my son.
Yeah.
A lot. We grew up on it together, and and he was a prodigy. Like that kid, man, he was smoking pro gamers.
Right.
And he won the San Diego Comic-Con Call of Duty championship when he was 12.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a funny story. But yeah, so it's been fantastic, and I've been learning a ton. I've been trying to learn more about the process of how video games are made, so that I can be a better asset to the team. Start conceptualizing. I just started using Maya recently to conceptualize, what I want the shots to be, and to give notes. To be able to give notes is what I endeavor to do, and learn, like, using existing assets. So like when the animators come up with something, particularly in a cinematic way, I can go in and do some camera manipulations, stuff like that, to give options, and is kind of the goal. I don't want to be an animator. I don't think that's my thing, but I do want to be able to conceptualize using those,
right,
and kind of lay out my shots, when I'm going to go in, and who knows, maybe get to a point one day where I'm creating shorts in Unreal and Maya, who knows,
right,
putting all that stuff together. So that's kind of the journey up to this point.
It's a pretty amazing journey, and I actually have a whole lot of follow-up questions. I'm going to go back and forth in part of your history because it's absolutely incredible. And I find it very moving. I know, the idea of you having a very, very real life and death experience, and that bond that you had with that woman in Iraq, and then finding a way to realize that you have the same power to do that within, film and television and entertainment. And I've been thinking about that lately because I have another podcast called Martini Giant, where we look at a bunch of movies, and we're big film buffs, big film buffs.
Oh, cool!
And
I picked up on a little bit of that when we were out to dinner.
I absolutely love it. And so, but recently we've really gotten into films, sort of exploring in more detail some films that are that took place in the 70s, et cetera, as a sort of a reaction or actions towards the military, the stuff that was going on in films like Apocalypse Now. And, I'm not even kidding you. I was just watching The Last Detail. I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but it's a Hal Ashby film with Jack Nicholson, and he plays a chief petty officer in it. And I think that's, you were a petty officer as well, weren't you?
Chief petty officer.
Yeah, so was he. So it's like, oh my God. But it's sort of this thing where I find that you can look at creativity and still find a way. It's not Hollywood isn't just a distraction. Or even video games. It's not just a distraction. It's a way to be able to express yourself and to make people understand a point of view. How has that changed for you? Do you still feel that way? Do you still feel that that's something that's your voice now?
I feel that even more so. Like every opportunity that I get, I learn from that experience on how it plugs into the divine architecture of the whole life story,
Sure.
right? And there's been times, as you go through as an actor, there's like, it's like you build up the coffers and then the coffers are depleted while you're waiting for the next job. And then you build up the coffers and then until you like really hit it and you get a show that's like running for 10 seasons or something like that, right? So, in those deserts in between, you start questioning. It's like, man, what am I putting my family through? What am I, what is this, and over and over again, there's been confirmation that I'm in the right spot. Whether that be a show hits or, some type of meditative breakthrough, or, you meet a certain person or, you just get these little, if you develop the awareness to see the landscape in that manner, where you're actively looking for the signs, then you'll see them. You'll see them and you'll know which way to go. But it takes a whole lot of hard work and development. And invariably, the stories that I want to tell are ones of, the stories that I really, truly want to tell as a director is stories about the attainment or loss of unconditional love. Because that's what it is. That's what all the iconic films are about. And we can put whatever veneer we want on it, right? Like what Aliens.
Sure.
Right? What's that story about? Sure, you might say aliens, but at the but it's about
her being a mother.
It's a show. Yes. What will that mother do for the love of that child? What will she go through? What you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's what that's those are the stories. Like for me, like Logan is the best Marvel film.
Yeah.
By far. Because it's
I was like, finally,
a story about a man's love for his daughter that he didn't know he had against the ticking clock of his own life, right? Expiring, and protecting that. And what will you do to protect that? Look at God of War, one of my favorite IPs, right? God of War. Guy was, in case you don't know what God of War is, Kratos is a Spartan that was tricked by the gods into murdering his own family.
Right.
And so he goes on a war path to destroy all the gods, which, you should really check that out if you haven't tried that out.
Yeah. Or even Last of Us. Look at Last of Us and that.
The Last of Us, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, that's the thing. I was going to ask you about that because, I know obviously you're definitely deep into the video game space and, but you're also thinking about acting and everything. But the writing that's happening in games today is rivaling, if not in some cases, way more creative than I'm seeing in the film industry. What are your thoughts about like what video games mean and what do they do?
So here's the thing, man. Like, I've been a gamer since they've been making games.
Right.
My first video game was Tennis for Two, which was Pong.
Right.
Right. It had like wood paneling on it.
Yep.
You remember this?
Yeah,
thing?
I do remember.
Like
that.
It had wood paneling on it, and it had the two big knobs, and so that was my first game, and then like every system from then on out, like that was a priority. Like Atari 2600 was the next one, right?
Yep.
And then ColecoVision, Intellivision, Commodore 64,
Yep.
the 128, the TurboGrafx 16.
Hmm.
Now I'm getting now I'm getting on it. I had a 3DO.
Do you remember the
I
Sierra
tried them.
games back in the day?
Sierra
Something
games.
like King's Quest and Space Quest and all that.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Those.
Dude, my favorite one. My favorite one when I was growing up, it was an arcade game, Dragon's
Oh
Lair,
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah. Of
course.
course.
Dragon's
Yeah.
Lair.
That was a Laserdisc game. It was super
That was a
special.
Laserdisc
Yeah.
game. Then Space Ace
Mhm.
and Cliffhanger,
Yep.
all of those. I but like I was huge into games the whole time. I was completely fascinated by the art. I mean, the art, the sound, the angles, the lights, and it's all immersive. Like you're a part of it.
Hmm.
You're a part of it, and whether or not you get to continue that story is directly proportional to how quick you can get out of the bad stuff you're standing in.
Right.
Right. So for me, being able to tell stories within that space, I feel is the most powerful form of storytelling that we can leverage.
Right.
I don't feel like we always do that. Different games are for different things. Like sometimes you want to just kind of shoot people in the face. You don't need a story. You just want to shoot people in the face. You know,
Right.
but why can't you shoot people in the face and like have some really kick-ass story to go with
I
it?
know.
And one of the exciting things for me is I want to be able to explore um, and I'm really excited about a lot of the things that we're doing, but one of the things that I really want to do is I want to explore story deeper within some IPs that are out there, without hitting the nail on the head for obvious
Hmm.
reasons. But I man, I have this kind of vision of having a game that there's a couple of different games that I'd like to explore, but ones that ones that can actually elicit a certain hormonal response.
Okay.
Using sound, light, all these types of things within the game to address very real issues that we have in ameliorating combat related stress, for
I'm glad you
example.
said that because I was going to say there's interesting work. I mean, I used to work. I used to talk to a guy named Paul Bevic, who was at ICT, and he's part of a bunch of people at ICT, and they're experimenting with a lot of game stuff that's helping people with PTSD. So,
See,
I,
that's really interesting stuff. I'd love to talk to you more about
yeah,
that because um, incorporating that stuff into a mainstream game to where everybody gets the benefit.
yeah, I see what
You
you're
know,
saying.
and it's not just we can elicit certain responses by how we weave that together, how we weave all those elements together, and those people that really have the immersive systems are obviously good to take much deeper advantage of it, but just having it out there,
Sure.
and incorporating it into this storytelling process. Because if we can merge the light, the sound, and the storytelling, to elicit emotional, sensorial responses, and I think that we can really use the storytelling leverage to take people down into this space, which may be where their home is anyway,
Sure.
and then start kind of like bringing them up and out of it. I'm going to share something with you.
Sure.
A good game that did some of that kind of gave me this idea is Ghost of Tsushima.
Okay.
You play this
Mm-mm.
game? Mm.
You have to explain it to me.
It's basically Assassin's Creed,
Okay.
but you're a samurai,
Okay.
and it's done really,
Really well.
really, really well. I mean, they've got like the Mongolian throat singers out there going,
Right.
they're using those sounds in it. They're using like meditation, like you go into these hot pools in Japan, and the premise of the story is you're a samurai, and you're avenging, the Mongolians are invading your land, and you're the guy that's compromising your traditions to fight the Mongolians unconditionally, asymmetrically, and it's just, and like the landscapes and the lighting's just like gorgeous, and you know and it's based off of the old samurai films. And like they even have a mode where you can switch it into that like black and white samurai type mode. So yeah, dude, it's super. You'd love it.
Yeah,
you'd love it. And it's completely, and it hit at a time where where I was going through some really hard stuff when because that very son that I took emergency custody of passed away in 2020.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So, it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. It's the spirituality that binds us, right? And so for me, it wasn't until like 2020 that these amazing events started happening professionally, when my son passed away. And the process of coming to terms with that grief and has developed a strength for me that and an understanding that has kind of refined, what it is I endeavor to do in this film and television thing, and that comes full circle, right? Sure. It's like where I was questioning it at one point, it comes full circle where my driving force in this medium is to incorporate all the aforementioned, lighting and, sound and all these types of things to tell a story of unconditional love. And it can be heart-wrenching at times, but we have to show. My biggest thing is that a lot of times I feel like we pull our punches when we're showing the power of the darkness, and we can't do that. We can't, because we're doing a disservice to the light.
Right.
You see, you can't have a painting without contrast.
Right.
You can't have a rich painting without darks.
Yep.
And so and we need to have it dark as fuck so we can show the power of the light.
Right.
And I think that those are the stories that I really want to tell are ones that, without hitting the nail on the head, but that kind of take people through this journey of failure, of loss, of betrayal, of death.
Yeah. It's how we process it, right? Is we process our own problems if we can experience it.
Absolutely. And then guide them, through this storytelling process, interactive storytelling process, on how to get to the light, to the light side of it, and to experience that through line of love.
I remember,
because that's the human experience. That's what we all want.
My daughter, when she went, the first movie she ever saw in theaters, right? So before, she would only see TV shows at home, and so she could pause, etc. So the first experience where she has to watch the whole thing through without any breaks, right? And we went to go see Toy Story 3. And, I'm sure you've seen the movie, but towards the end of the movie, they're all being lowered into a trash pile, about to be thrown into an incinerator. And she just about had it. She's like, I want to leave. She wants to leave the movie theater. And I felt horrible because I forced her to sit down and watch this thing that was torturing her so that she could see it resolve itself.
she was already setting the tracks.
Right.
Like,
And so it's like,
no,
you gotta see, and then she obviously, appreciated the fact that she got to see it, the ending that she needed to see, but it was something that was very like, oh God, but it is, I want to talk about the medium of games again a little bit. Cause you're talking about this specific thing, and I've always loved games, and I've always loved games that have good story, engage you, or exciting. But when I played BioShock Infinite, have you played BioShock Infinite?
I have not played it all the way through. I came into it late, and
That's all right.
Yeah, I have a hard time.
It's okay. I played the whole thing through, and as I was getting towards the end, it just had this way of resolving the story that brought me to tears. I was like, I've never cried from a video game before. And I was completely, because I've been playing it for 40, 50, 60 hours, whatever it is, right? And that's not even that long for a video game, but you are really into it. And then it guides you through this process. And it was an emotional release to see that. And I think that is really something very special, obviously.
Absolutely. And that's just good storytelling.
Yeah.
That's it all begins with a script, right?
Yep.
It all begins with a good script. But the reason I think video games have the one up on traditional storytelling in film or television is because we get to sculpt these characters. We get to change the way they look. We get to, go through them. We get to go through and upgrade them to achieve new challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We get to, we become involved with these characters in a way that is much more encompassing than, just watching somebody experience something on the screen.
It's a first-person experience,
It's a first-person experience.
Mm-hmm.
So in most cases, right? So it's to me, like, that can be leveraged, like, and I come from the film and television side of things. So I'm trying to, actually, this is one of the things we're working through now, is I'm trying to incorporate some of those principles in our process at Treyarch, and they're very supportive, so and what I mean by that is the traditional storytelling process, but then, how that is additive to the video game storytelling process and production pipeline.
Okay.
So those are some of the things that we're working on as well, that I can talk about more after the game releases, but we'll have to come back in 2024.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's that level of depth that I think that, and of course, engaging gameplay, right? You want to be having fun in between the storytelling portions,
right?
And it can be really challenging too, because especially in an open world format,
Mm-hmm.
because in an open world format, you have these cutscenes and you have to be really smart about how you do the cutscenes, right? It has to dovetail. For me, like, you can't. It's clunky when there's a cutscene and then there's gameplay, and then there's cutscene and there's gameplay. For me, I feel like the gameplay has to drive the narrative in some regard, right? It's not just about, like, leveling up. It's got to drive the narrative. There has to be a sense of urgency, like, and that's what should I ever become the creative director of a video game.
That's your motivation.
One of the biggest things I will be pushing for is to have a narrative-driven gameplay style that is encompassing to where it develops a sense of urgency in the player, that they inherently feel that aspect of the story in what they're doing in gameplay wise towards getting to, X, Y, or Z to that next, cutscene,
Sure.
or that drives that story forward. and everything within that game is bent on, you know, kind of exerting that kind of pressure so that they feel what pressure that character is actually in. You see?
How do you do that? Because in games, obviously, you've directed mocap, right? So that's a different way of directing than directing behind
It
a
is.
camera, especially in games, right? Because how has it been sort of thinking about the directing mocap director and how that affects the way that you can tell stories or the way that you even tell your actors to act, or how does it affect all of that stuff?
So there are some there's a big technical aspect that impacts, that definitely impacts the performance side of things,
Sure.
right? Traditional film, you have some technical aspects like you want to look to this side of the frame, the map
Hmm.
box. You want to, the lighting's got to be like this, and you've got to hit your mark.
Hmm.
So because of our,
Focus.
depth of field and all these types of
Sure.
things, right? So those are the kind of technical aspects of that. But it's much more so in video games because of, I mean, it's myriad in nature where you have, the rig can only do this, or the AI has to pick up a certain, when we're picking the gameplay back up, the AI's got to be in this type of position, and how is that actor motivated to get into that position, that ending position, so that it, kind of translates, right?
Right.
So I'm very much in um, my training. Everything's training,
Sure.
right? So OJT, you know. But as far as me as what I do as a performance capture director is, for me, it's all about the performance, right?
Okay.
So it becomes more about working with the performers, and I think this may have it just come from combat or being a SEAL or something, but like seeing things that are out of place that just don't jive,
Okay.
right? That aren't right. Like if somebody moves a certain way, and I'm like, I don't like the shape of that. Let's change the way that body shape is. Let's move it like this,
Right.
and then I work on performance. Or in the case of like Diablo, those, well, they were just fantastic to work with,
Mm.
and and they were very inclusive on like story, everything. They wanted to hear all of it, and they were so humble and just like, yes, like, and when they saw me geeking out about it, like they liked that, they're
Right.
like, oh, he's bringing my geek back out about this IP, and
Right.
it's like, I think it really fed on each other well. But for example, in that type of thing, it's like maybe holding an object a certain way, the way they're holding an object, kind of, because this is all motion capture, right?
Hmm.
Like, when are we putting this object away, vice, in the middle of dialogue, sticking it away, or maybe we hold on to this thing till after this person dies, and then you give another look back to the object and then put it away.
Right.
Then the whole scene becomes about that object, right?
Right.
Now this object has importance, and you've just empowered that object, which drives the narrative.
Right.
Now I've got to bring this object to this person. Now I've put importance on this object that the player can feel,
Right.
and that's very critical. Like that's, to me, that's very critical,
Yeah.
and like, because now they understand the importance of getting that there. Had I just stuck this thing in my pocket and continued the dialogue, and now you got to go deliver this object, it doesn't have the same punch,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of an example,
Yeah.
and then having the technical aspects of just moving from gameplay mechanic to gameplay mechanic, and how all of those different things tie in to the IP. Now you have to think of the whole IP as a whole. What's the gameplay style? What's the how did the people move in this world? How do they, and it's very much like theater in a lot of ways, directing a theater type of performance. Um, big long takes, all these types of things. It's like a merge.
I had
between the two,
I had a
right?
friend of mine who's also an actor, and he said, he was doing a bunch of TV and stuff, but he also did a bunch of theater. And he says when he was an actor on one of the Grand Theft Auto games, and he goes, "Oh, this feels like theater way more than I thought it was going to feel like." Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
absolutely know what you mean. Listen, I want to make sure we're conscious of the time. Hopefully you're all okay. I can go a little long, which is absolutely no problem, but I do want to make sure we have a chance to talk about your Vital Warriors project. Can you tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Vital, and I'm good on time.
Okay.
I got about another half
Okay.
hour. So Vital Warrior is a registered 501c3 that I use
Mm-hmm.
to teach these meditative principles, not just the meditative principles, but this lineage of the teachings of what's called Kundalini Yoga. And it's developed by thousands of years of warrior lineage, and the manner in which my teacher imparts it has been revelatory for me
Okay.
personally. It's led to uh, the realization of the power of to cultivate creativity, to find my creative source and to grow and nurture that creative source to where you have a realization that of where that creative source resides.
Right.
And once we have the kind of view of that landscape, they call it the yoga of awareness, right?
Okay.
And so it's you develop the awareness of the landscape, and then you can see kind of the subconscious, and you get kind of an intuitive feel of how to navigate that and identify where obstacles are, where resistances are, and how to ameliorate those resistances and navigate obstacles or remove programming. Um, a good analogy is like the Koreans comb the beach so they can tell when somebody's come up onto the beach, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's infiltrated their beach. Well, kind of think of it like that. Like you clear the kind of subconscious so that when an errant thought form or somebody else's opinion kind of permeates the system, then you know that it's not yours,
Right.
right? And you can do something about it.
Interesting.
So if I say something, if I put out something, if I put out a sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
This sound you're hearing right now is getting in you.
Right.
It is a part of you. Right when you hear it, it's a part of you. It goes in the ear, it vibrates the tympanic membrane,
Mm-hmm.
right? It hits the three bones, which vibrate the cochlea and move the fluid in the cochlea, and that is then interpolated into an electronic signal in the brain that means something to you,
Right.
that elicits a certain response in you,
Yep.
right? So we want to develop the ability to clean that shit out, and that's what I teach is how to, I teach as accurately as I possibly can in the manner in which my teacher has shown me. And 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 it has served very well. So currently I teach these classes every week to a number of special operations forces. We have a program, and it's open for all veterans and first responders. And I teach them at the Rama Yoga Institute in Venice at 11 o'clock on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
Venice, California. Or not Venice, California. That's where they used to be. Santa Monica, California
Okay.
now. They've upgraded. They got a bigger place.
Okay.
Um, and and I got to tell you that the people that engage in it, the whole nonprofit was designed to replicate my experience. How to transmute my life's experiences that I had once had the perception of being negative, very bad, into an incorporation of who I am. And in that process, developing a strength and an understanding, an experiential understanding that all of those events were absolutely critical. All of them. all of them were absolutely critical in developing me in a way that I can rise to the destiny. I mean, it's because of my military. It's because of my military experience that I wound up in Transformers.
Right.
Had I been working as an actor for 22 years, maybe if I was super lucky, I would have got a role like that in a film like
Right.
that. But because of my military experience, that I wound up there.
Right.
And then because of all my combat experience, I wound up as the performance capture director of Call of Duty.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you see?
Yeah, absolutely.
So trying to help other people, not go, I want to replicate that path and this is how I replicate that path, but to have the experiences that forge their own path with a like type of, outcome. Invariably, it always winds up being the discovery of the creative source, using that creative talent in service towards awakening the creative source and talent within others.
Yeah.
And for me, it's film and television and video games. Film, television, video games.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Somebody else, it might be knife making.
Yeah. Sure. Right. I mean, I know when, I certainly have not had the experiences that you've had, but I know that, when the pandemic happened, I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. And to me, it became fly fishing. That was my thing. Right. So
that's a meditation.
Yeah. It's 100% a meditation.
Yeah.
I go to the park and cast, and that's all I'm doing. And that's a meditative process. Very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. I've tried a lot of different things, and this was the most, powerful for me. It's not the only thing we do, but it is the foundation of it. That's a whole other long story how I wound up finding these teachings, but invariably I did, and I found my teacher, and by finding my teacher, that really changed everything for me.
That's amazing.
And completely transformed me. Like, if you saw who I was and who I am now, it's like two different people.
Right.
It truly looks like two different people. Even people that knew me back from the military, they're like, holy shit, you're like a different person. And that's from these meditations.
That's wonderful.
Much higher form. And there's always new and higher levels of it that we go through, and that's why I love it so much. It's like a martial art for the brain.
Right.
And there's other things that we do as well. I endeavor to have everything all under one roof.
Right.
And it's going to be like a school of creativity, when I get it done. It's like kind of built, think of like the Last Samurai type of lifestyle, and it incorporates, jujitsu, the meditations, art, creativity, music, like, farming, animals, like all of it, and that's kind of the vision of it, So.
I think it's amazing, and I love I love how you've taken what has been so important in your life and found ways of expressing it through the art that you do and through the tools you do. I think this is a important thing, especially since you're trying to help those in the military that need the help right now. I don't think that people in the military are being treated as well as they should be treated, especially when they come home. And I know I donate to a lot of those causes myself.
Good.
Because I think it's important. And I have a friend of mine, Brandon Davis, who is in Special Forces, who is also a visual effects artist at the same time, for God's sakes. I don't know how he did both at the same time. Wow. He would just suddenly have to leave, and he says, where did you go? I was like, I can't tell you, but my Korean's way better than it used to be. But I know, and so I know that's very important. And I think it's, when I met you at Darren's thing, and Darren's got a fantastic group of friends that he's with, and I saw the things you're doing. It's like, I have to have this guy's story. I want to hear it. I want to hear the whole story. So it's really cool. And I love how you're using technology. You're not afraid of technology. You love video games, and but you're extremely creative, and you have purpose, which is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I look forward to, being able to kind of spread those wings a little more, that I think that's my biggest challenge, is understand when we understand. First, it was understanding what the path is,
Right.
And then once you understand the path, it's like having the patience to continue to understand that things need to unfold in a certain way,
Right.
and just being present. And that's what, these meditations and everything really help me with, and being present in what I'm doing, and and really enjoying, truly enjoying you hear it all the time, and people say it like a cliche. At least it always came off to me that way.
Sure.
Like, enjoy the process. It's like, man, you're probably eating really well, and like, it's easy for you to enjoy the process. You're like feeding your family, um so that's a very real thing, right? So it wasn't, to be honest with you, it wasn't until after my son passed away that and incorporating all of that and continuing to incorporate that I started to understand what that meant.
Right.
I know that seems counterintuitive, but it's like that type of forced understanding, like you, for me, the way I got through that is just by not trying to hold things in my mind, but to completely learn how to just open my heart and let it truly feel. Not try to protect my heart, just like completely unplug, which I did. Went to the mountains of San Diego, and just like for a week, just like sat in it, just like in the wilderness, and just just bore myself to it. And that continues to be rewarding, and is a that's going to be it's a limitless font.
Mm-hmm.
It's a limitless font. It's such an incredible blessing to be able to feel that fully is a touchstone of everything I do.
Right.
It's the core of, like, it's the core of my heart, because it's love. Like, grief is an aspect of love. It's the shadow of love.
Yeah.
And that's, and I found that if I come from that, it doesn't matter what I'm going through, because I know from experience, I know that, oh, hold on.
Oh.
A pop-up
Okay.
happened. I know that from experience that whatever it is I'm going through is shaping my future, and it's shaping the future of my family. So in a way, I can develop a gratuity for it even while being in it. Now I understand what that sounds like, and it takes a hell of a lot of work to do it. I'm not saying it's easy. It's the hardest thing. This has come from my life.
Mm-hmm.
This is by far the hardest thing that I've ever done, is this spiritual path, and creating from this spiritual path, and being able to understand that negative and positive are both power sources that we can draw from, as long as we reside in the throne of neutrality.
Wow. Well, it's been an amazing journey, and I really appreciate it. And I love for you to tell more stories about unconditional love, both receiving and losing it, which I'm sure is a similar experience. But thank you so much, Mikal. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.